You guys know I love podcasting and listening to podcasts, and I'm guessing if you're listening to this that you love podcasts too. Have you ever considered podcasting yourself? It is a great way to reach your audience, grow your know, like and trust factor, and not need to show your face unless you want to. If it is something you've thought about but you don't know where to start, then head over to becomeapodcaster.uk/BAP quiz, BAP quiz, to access a 2-minute quiz that will help you work out what type of podcast might suit you. That's becomeapodcaster.uk/BAP quiz. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Maya Angelou. You're listening to WPC UK, the place to be if you are looking to grow and streamline your business in 2023. I'm your host, Donna Eade, and I'll be walking you through processes, productivity and planning, along with bringing you business experts with knowledge to share. Let's make 2023 the year of success in your business. Back to the podcast, everybody, and hello if you are new and this is your first time listening. This is an exciting episode to join us for. I am so excited to be bringing you this episode today because today celebrates 3 years of this podcast, and what a journey it has been. Way back in April 2020, can you believe it's been 3 years already? I started this podcast, and I don't know about you, but so much has changed for so many folks. And in this podcast today, I want to talk to you about the evolution of the podcast and why change is something we should all embrace. And this, guys, comes from a self-confessed change phobe, but I'm learning and growing too. So let's jump in. First, I wanted to talk about why this podcast exists in the first place. So to do that, we have to step back and talk about the initial podcast in its original form, and that was the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors podcast. I wanted to reach wedding vendors in the UK, and I wanted to talk to them. I had a message I wanted to share with them. I had a business that I wanted to work with them on. And so I chose a podcast. I didn't want to write a blog. I had a blog when I was a wedding photographer. And as much as I enjoyed writing it, writing doesn't come naturally to me. I am not the quickest when it comes to writing. And I really find typing difficult. If you've ever had an email from me and seen that I have spelt the TEH, or you have seen that I have like completely got a word wrong in there or missed letters off, it's because when I type, my brain seems to work quicker than my fingers, and I'm always like a couple of words ahead, and then I type the wrong thing. I feel like there is possibly something called keyboard dyslexia. And if there is, I have it. I am fine if I am writing pen and paper. I can get my spellings right, but on the keyboard, it just doesn't happen. And I don't know why. It's just a thing that happens. And I am slow at writing, so it's just not the most convenient option for me. And then you have the option of doing video, and video to me wasn't an option because I didn't want to have to get camera ready every time I wanted to make content. And this was pre the days of me really understanding how powerful batching could be. So I was just like, I don't want to get camera ready every week. I don't want to have to like put face and makeup on, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know why I felt the need to do that, because I do jump on camera quite often these days and I don't have any makeup on. And I'm a bit of one of those people that's like anti-makeup, anti-filters. I just don't do it as a general rule. I do like to put a filter on now and again. I did one at the weekend actually on TikTok, and I thought, my gosh, I wish I could wake up and look like that every morning. But it's not the reality, and I'm all about keeping it real. So camera ready wasn't a thing for me back then. I didn't want to do video, and I'd been a podcast listener for probably around 7 years at that time, and I just loved the idea of podcasting. I loved the idea of having your own radio show. So I decided that for my weekly content to reach my audience, I was going to podcast. And if you have listened to this podcast for any length of time, you will know that I believe in having weekly content to give to your audience and share with your audience. And for me, podcasting was where it's at, because it was kind of the best of both worlds. You get the voice, you get the tonality, you get the humor that you don't always pick up on in writing. It's a lot harder for people to put their humor and tonality into the written word. So you get that from a podcast, the same as you would with a video. But then you also get the advantage that you can repurpose your podcast into written form. So if you want to do some writing around the topic, around the podcast episode, you can do that as well. So to me, podcasts are great. Definitely something you could do for your audience if you are interested in creating weekly content. I highly recommend podcasting. Not that I'm biased, but that is why this podcast came about. So it started off as a way for me to reach wedding vendors in the UK. However, time changes everything. We grow, we learn, we move forward, we fall backwards, and everyone and everything around us does the same. So if this podcast hadn't changed over the years, I'd be concerned, because everything new has to find its rhythm and its place. Look at you and me. If we hadn't changed from being brand new, we wouldn't be able to walk, talk, think critically, or love. Because as a baby, you don't do any of those things. You grow to love your parents because they give you the security and they give you unconditional love from birth. So you grow to love them. However, it's not something we are innately born with. We're blank sheets when we're born, and we grow and we learn. So not everyone can do all of those things that I listed, and there is so much more that we can do as we grow. It's a natural way of life for all new things that we change. So we had a name change after the first year to make it more accessible to the wider wedding audience. I changed from the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors podcast to the WPC UK, the Wedding Procast UK. And that is because I wanted to make it more accessible to a wider wedding audience, because I felt like a lot of people would, well, it wasn't what I felt, it's what I was told. I had people telling me that they thought it was a members only podcast. So I changed the name to make it more accessible. I brought on more guests to share their knowledge, and the brand colours changed to symbolise these changes. But things outside the podcast also changed. And so my business as it was is no longer going to be that way. And so now the podcast is going to go through its biggest change yet. It was born on the 16th of April, and this is the last episode of year 3. And next week is going to be the first episode of year 4, and we are going to welcome in this big change. So before we do that, I wanted to take a moment and look back at some of my favourite guest episodes from the last 3 years. Now, when I say my favourite, to be honest with you, I absolutely love every interview I've ever done. However, I wanted to bring in some episodes that talk about this idea of change, of evolving and making big decisions in our businesses and in our lives, and how that looks. So these episodes I thought were really topical for this episode that we're doing today, and I will link them all in the show notes so you can head over and listen to all of them in more depth. But I've got a little bit of a clip from each of them, and so we're going to dive straight into that. So the first episode that I wanted to bring to you was episode 59, and that was Evolve Your Brand with Marie-Louise O'Neill. Now, Marie-Louise is an expert in Canva, but she is a graphic designer at heart. She helps businesses with their branding. So I wanted to talk to Marie-Louise about changing your brand and how it changes over time, which is exactly what is happening with my business. The business is actually changing completely, and the branding is having to change with it. But I've also evolved the brand over time. So this was a really good episode to bring up today. So take a listen to this clip and we will have a chat about it after.
If you want the best results, paying for an expert to do it means that you're going to get that better result. So it comes back to what your long-term goals for your business is as well. Because yes, you're considering a rebrand, and maybe you'll rebrand again in the future. but you want to be thinking of this current brand is going to last you 5 to 10 years, or, possibly. It's difficult to know what's around the future, but you don't want your logo, for example, to be so trendy that it's out of date in a couple of years. But equally, you want to allow that kind of possibility to grow and evolve too.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So that was episode 59 with Marie Louise. Now, we did speak in this episode about knowing the one thing that you want to be known for and how you can bring that to your audience. We spoke about knowing your audience so that you know how to project yourself to them, and we spoke about getting in a professional to help you, because the last thing you want to do is to spend lots of time on your branding just to find out that your logo is really trendy because you really like it now, because maybe you see a lot similar brands and logos out there, but then it becomes a trend that then dates your brand as time moves on. So talking about how to create that longevity in your brand so that it covers you for the next 5 to 10 years. So it was a really good episode overall to talk about your branding, which is a great part of making those changes and growing as a business. So that was episode 59. The next episode I wanted to bring to you is a really great episode to bring to your attention right now. I'm so excited for this guest, but this was episode 64 with Henriette Donnell, and it was called Let's Collaborate. Now, for me, collaboration is a great way to really get to know yourself and to know what you enjoy doing, what you like to do, how you like to work, and just growing those connections, which can really help you to evolve your business and to make those changes that are necessary. Having a support system around you of like-minded entrepreneurs that understand the way of your business, your niche, your trade, the things that you work with, making sure that you have people around you that know these things is really going to help to push you forward and to grow and change and make positive movements in your business. Now, I have to mention that Henriette is an absolute superstar because she literally does eat and breathe what she teaches. So in this episode, let me play the clip for you, then I'm going to tell you why I think she is such a special person.
In your opinion, why are collaborations so important for us to do?
Well, apart from just the fact that it gives you extra visibility and it definitely could give you some great clients as well. The reasons why it's so important, I think the number one thing is you really get a moment and an opportunity to step outside of yourself. And I mean this in a sense of getting out of your comfort zone, doing something that is something you never would have thought about, and this also just opens up that universe of possibilities. When you collaborate with other people, you'll be so surprised that you think of this as an opportunity. And from that, other possibilities and other opportunities would just arise. And you think, how did this happen? Where did these opportunities come from? But I think one of the other elements as well is when you start collaborating with people, you really get into a position where you can just appreciate the space and the energy that you share with those collaborators. And this is where people come alive.
Okay, so there you have it. Henriette talking about how collaboration can help with your visibility, help to get to know yourself better. So much good stuff in that episode. So definitely head over and take a listen to episode 64. It will be linked in the show notes. But the fantastic thing that I wanted to let you guys know was that Henriette has actually written a book, and she has not done this alone. She has literally listened to her own advice and collaborated with 14 other businesswomen, so 15 of them all together have written a book called Fab Collab, and that is coming out very soon. I will definitely let you know when it is available, but it is talking all about how women create success, and I am so absolutely thrilled for her. She is not the only one in this book that I know personally, so I am really excited for all the women that took part in this book, and you will be able to take a read of it very, very soon. But I just had to mention it because I just thought it was just so perfect that this book is coming out soon, that I was doing this episode on change and decided to bring in Henriette's episode, which was all about collaboration. So collaboration is definitely something that we all need to be looking at doing in our business to help us to change and grow. So the next episode that I wanted to point you to was episode 68, and that was with Amy McLaren. Now, Amy is just a fantastic woman in my mind. She has a charity that she started about 15 years ago now called Village Impact. Didn't start off named Village Impact. It has had its changes over the time, but its purpose has stayed the same. She was on talking about passion to purpose, making your life work for you. And her passion and her purpose is to help others. And she is part of creating schools in Africa, in Kenya particularly. I think it is the Kenyan government they work with, and they have just opened their 15th school, which was an all-girls school, which is what me and Amy spoke about in this episode. This was the purpose of her book. She wrote Passion to Purpose, and the sales from that book helped to open this all-girls school in Kenya, which is just fantastic. And I love how she speaks about how we can turn our passions and our purpose into something that works for us in our life. And I just think that was a really important episode to draw your attention to. So let's have a listen to the clip.
And what you just said there was actually a perfect example of the quote that I said at the beginning, is that you were really passionate about it. You weren't looking at the problems, you were looking at the how-to. And Stu wasn't quite there with you yet. And he's like, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. And you're like, no, we can.
That's right. I'm like,
love that.
We'll figure it out, right? Like I had no idea how to start a charity. Like we were trying to figure out the business because we were building another business at that time. But we both always had this heart of just being with people and learning from other people and building things as a team and together, because I really do think, and I know Stu says this, where, we're better together. And I really think we are in this whole world. We're better when we work together and we learn from each other. We can do extraordinary things.
I love that clip so much, coming off the back of Henriette's and talking about collaboration. We are better together. And I loved this episode so much. Do go and take a listen to the full thing. Amy was talking there about how she wasn't looking at the possible problems of making this change in their lives. She was talking about the solutions. How could they make it happen? Not why they couldn't do it. How could they make it happen? And I think in business, sometimes we get bogged down with well, I can't possibly do that, and I haven't got time to do that, and that's not going to work for me, rather than reframing it and saying, how can I do that? How would it be possible? How can I make the time? And so just reframing our mindset is so important when it comes to making changes, which is a fantastic lead into the next episode that I wanted to bring to your attention, which was the very next episode. It was episode 69, and that was with Vivian Joy. She is fantastic. And we spoke all about, is negative self-talk sabotaging your success? So let's take a listen to the clip.
They haven't challenged you, you've challenged, i.e., I don't know, I wasn't as good as Sarah, who I sat next to in maths. She knew everything and I didn't know anything. She found it easy and I didn't. Therefore, I'm
no good.
I'm no good. I'm not as clever. I'm not as worthy. So sometimes nobody's done anything. We've just made a decision based on our perception of someone else. It's amazing we ever, A, get along, B, get on with life, because we all sorts of shitty beliefs from nothing at all. It's hilarious. Yeah. So the example of just walking into a room, that person could have looked at you and thought anything, but you are making a decision as to what that look means, and your unconscious job to keep you safe. So you have to do that. It's natural. You can't stop that. So the best you can do is get your own belief map sorted, your own mindset sorted, so that whatever happens, you can make your own depiction based from a position of power and confidence rather than disempowered and fear.
So there you have it. I don't know about you, but I have definitely been that person who has walked into a room and made assumptions of what people are thinking about me. And I just sort of remember hearing that somebody else's opinion of you is none of your business. And I was just like, that's so right. That's something that we all could do with working on. I know I could. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I am sure there are people out there that have that same kind of feeling. And it's this projection of maybe how we feel about ourselves. Maybe we're thinking of ourselves as imposters in that situation, that we don't feel comfortable in that situation because we don't feel worthy. We don't feel enough to be in that particular place. And then we see somebody look at us. Maybe they're looking at, oh, who's that? I haven't seen that person before. And that's the look they're giving you. And instead you see it as, oh, what's she doing here? She doesn't belong here. You know, it's so easy to misinterpret other people. And it's so important that, as Vivian said in there, you know, that we get ourselves sorted, that we have our own map, our own worthiness locked in, so that when we see those looks, when we see these people, even if our first assumption is that they are looking at us in a particularly negative way, that doesn't affect us because we know that we're worthy enough. So I thought that it was really important to bring that episode in, because negative self-talk is something that can really stop you in your tracks. It can stop you having that success in the business that you have as it is. And sometimes we are stopping ourselves from having that success, and we move on too quickly from things because it is us that is the issue, not what we are, you know, trying to create necessarily. So I think it's really important to get our own mindset, our own belief system sorted and locked down, because that's the one thing that's not going to change if you don't actually make an effort. You know, you can change your branding, you can change your business, you can change your audience, but none of that is going to matter if inside you stay the same. So it's really important to grow internally as well as changing things on the outside. So that is why I brought that episode in. Again, do go and listen to the full episode. It was a really good episode. That is episode 69, is negative self-talk sabotaging your success. Now, the last episode is actually the most recent of all these episodes, and we're going to jump into the treble figures. And the reason I have put this episode in is, well, a couple of reasons. One, Amy Porterfield is the person. The very first podcast I ever listened to was her podcast. So she is the reason that I have my podcast. I have loved listening to her podcast for the last 7 or so years, and seeing it grow and seeing her business change over time has been a fascinating thing to watch and learn from. So I wanted to bring in this episode because she's the reason this is here in the first place. But also the episode that we did together was a really powerful episode, especially if you are not yet in a business of your own, if you're thinking about jumping ship and you haven't yet, or you're in a business and you've realized that this isn't the business that you want and you're going to have to start from scratch again. She really hones in on this in her book, 2 Weeks Notice, and that's what we spoke about. So let's take a listen to this clip, and then we will come back and talk about it.
You mentioned in the book a story about your best friend's wedding and how you were working slyly whilst you were there. And I know that this weekend or last weekend, you were at another wedding.
Oh my goodness. I love that you made this parallel.
I would love to see hear from you the difference between those two and how you now sort of see your freedom.
Let's talk about this. Okay. So when I was still in my 9-to-5 job, you're right. My best friend was getting married in this little sleepy town in California where Wi-Fi was very sparse. Like I couldn't get it anywhere. And I was secretly, meaning I didn't want anyone in the wedding party to know that I had to get this project done while I was at this destination wedding. And so I would sneak in the back of little cafes, like mooching off of their Wi-Fi, praying no one from the wedding party saw me because I was supposed to be present and I absolutely was not. I was stressed out the entire experience, but I thought no one really could tell except my husband, who's like, you're looking frantic and crazy. But I was like, just be quiet. I got to get it done. And so I get to the wedding. I do a cheers with my best friend through champagne. And she says to me, all you do is work. And I was devastated. Number one, she was right. Number two, I didn't realize she noticed. And number three, I was embarrassed. Like, yeah, I am working my life away for somebody else building their empire. I'm on someone else's time and someone else's dime. And here I am at my best friend's wedding, working my life away and kind of ruining the experience for her and I to connect through that. So I was devastated, but fast forward to this weekend. One of my very dear friends got married in Miami. I love this couple so very much. I didn't crack my computer once. That baby didn't come out. I got a massage before the wedding. I stayed out late. I slept in the next morning. This is the life that I want.
I absolutely loved this episode because Amy is 15 years in business now. So she has done it all. She has done the scrappy starting from scratch. She has done the messy middle bit. She's come out the other side. She is growing and she is moving on to the next step. So she started off as a solopreneur. And when I was listening to her, I think it was she was in a business partnership at the time, which she speaks about in her book. And she was trying to get out of this partnership shortly after I started listening to her. And she had a right-hand woman and she was working solo contractors. Now she has a team of 20 people. And she's changed her work week so that she now only works a 4-day work week. And they have a 3-day work weekend. And that is for all of her staff. They all do Monday to Thursday. And I think that that is such a wild journey to have gone through and to have seen and watched from the outside. But I think it is so important that we can see the potential and where it could be. And she admits, you know, she's a self-confessed workaholic and she admits that. And she said in the podcast episode that she wished she had started this transition to a 4-day work week much earlier in her business. She could have done it much earlier. She could have made changes and not been in that hustle culture much earlier in her business than she did. So in fairness, she's missed out on a lot of the time, though, that time freedom that our own businesses can give us, because she felt like she had to stay in that kind of corporate hustle mentality. So I wanted to bring that to your attention because part of our change is kind of what Amy calls it debossing, but it is kind of getting out of that mentality of working for somebody else and working all the hours and doing the overtime because you need to hit those deadlines. You are your own boss. You set your deadlines. So I think it's really important to step back, look at your business and how it is working. And I just loved this episode for that purpose. The other reason that I mentioned Amy's episode is because she was number one top of my bucket list of guests to have on my show. I absolutely adore her. I think she is such a wonderful human being. I just want to be her best friend. And so I needed to bring that episode on because she was my number one bucket list guest. And I managed to get an interview with her just before I hit my 3-year mark on my podcast. So that just goes to show what the power of intention can do. And it wasn't that she fell into my lap and said, "Hey, Donna, I want to come on your podcast." I put myself in a position to be there at the right time to take advantage of an offer that was made. And I got to have her on the podcast. Would I love to have her on to have a longer podcast about something else? Absolutely, I would. But I will take it. I was so happy to have her on the podcast. So, as I say, it was an absolute pleasure to interview such interesting people, and I look forward to bringing even more interviews in this next year. I have already got loads lined up, so make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. You can head over to donnaeade.com/subscribe to get on the list to be notified, and also subscribe on your favorite pod player. My favorite is Good Pods because it has a social element to it where you can follow podcasters, your friends and celebrities and check out what they're listening to. You can listen to the same episodes, have conversations about it. And I really enjoy that. So that will be linked at donnaeade.com/subscribed too. So you can come over and follow me there. I would love to see you over there. So you can see a lot has changed. Change is growth. Change shows you're learning. Change gives you more opportunities. Change is not failure. It's easy to fear change because better the devil you know, right? But if you don't change, nothing changes. If you're 100% happy with where you are and your lot in life, then perhaps you don't want or need to change. But if things aren't working or you're not happy, change is the way you'll move forward. And although I love this podcast and it makes me very happy to sit here and record for you guys, it wasn't working in the way I hoped. So it's time to change. And I hope that you will join me for that change, and you might look at your own business and what's working, what's not, what do you enjoy to do, and what do you detest? See if you can make some changes to do more of what you love in your business and less of what you don't. Perhaps it's a complete business overhaul or a 180 pivot to something completely different. We are all moving through this life much faster than any of us would like. And although many people don't get to where they want to be at the end, it doesn't mean you stop trying. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do as much as you can to make sure you enjoy the journey. Because guys, guess what? Here's the secret. Listen in. The journey is the destination. Thank you so much for joining me for the last 3 years. I am so grateful to every single one of you who has listened and engaged with this podcast. And I want to give a big shout out to Gary Trotman, who is our #1 engaged listener. Thank you so much. I hope that you will continue to enjoy the podcast and its transformed state. I am really excited about what is to come. Don't forget to head over to donnae.com/subscribe to sign up for notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.